guys, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using this MFT Harvest Buddies stamp set and some Hero Arts wood grain textured vellum. I've started out by stamping out my images in VersaFine Onyx Black ink on some Bristol smooth surface cardstock, and I clear heat emboss that. And I'm going to be coloring with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens today. Beginning with my tree branch, I'm using number 65 mid brown and just adding some color to the bottom of that. Then I'm going to take my number 2 round paintbrush. This is the silver black velvet brushes. I'll be using the number 2 and the number 4 today. I'll just switch back and forth as needed. And I'm just spreading that color upwards so that I have a nice highlight at the top. It did get a little bit too dark for me towards the thinner part of the tree, so I just added a little bit of extra water and blotted that off with a paper towel. Also, if I get anything out of the lines, it's real easy to just add some clean water and blot that up as well. I'll continue using number 65 mid brown as the base layer of my squirrel. I will be adding another color on top of this in a little bit, but I wanted to have this brown tone underneath to just add some extra depth and dimension. So I'm just adding in small areas. I don't want to let the color settle into the paper too much, so I'm just working in small little areas and blending that color out. And then I'll just move on to his face, adding a little bit of shading to the underside and the left side, imagining that my light source is in the right top corner. And then I'll just blend that out with some clean clear water as well. The paper that I'm using today, as I mentioned, is Bristol Smooth Surface. I find that this works really well with these Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens, as long as you do work in small areas and start to blend that color out pretty quickly before it settles into the paper. The vellum, it has a vellum surface, so it's coated in something that allows the pigment to sit on top of the page. I also have heard very good things about the Canson XL watercolor. My friend Carrie Webster of KW Card Design here on YouTube prefers that to the Bristol. I have not tried that myself, but I do plan to. That might be another option for you. Moving on to my little wheelbarrow, I'm using number 62 dark brown, and again just adding some shading at the bottom of the wood slats and on the left hand side. And I'm just blending that out with some more water. And again, if I get too much pigment in these small areas, which it's easy to do since there's not a lot of room to blend, I just go ahead and add some extra water and blot that up with a paper towel until I'm happy with the look that I am getting. I'm using that same 62 dark brown to shade all the tops of my little acorns. And these I'm actually shading on the right hand side, and that's because I already have an idea of where they're going on my card. A couple of these are going to be tucked under the leaves of the tree branch, and the leaves would be casting a shadow on that side, so that's why I did that. Just going to shade the tops of the ones in the little wheelbarrow as well. And then I'm going to move on to my birds, and for those I'm using number 50 yellow. And these are going to be facing different directions on the card, so I'm just keeping that in mind as I do my shading, just shading towards the back of each of them. I tried to add a little bit of color with the paintbrush to their tails, but it's so small that it was a lot easier to just go in with the marker. These have such a fine tip that they're able to get into those tiny spaces. And I'll do the same with the orange for the beak. Using number 41 light green to shade my leaves, and I'm just adding the darkest to the base of those and then blending out to have a highlight at the tip. I wanted to keep my color palette very bright and fresh and spring-like, even though this is traditionally a fall set since it's called Harvest Buddies. But that's one of my favorite things to do, is to try to use a stamp set in a different way from how it was intended. So I decided to make a spring card. So I'll just continue blending out my leaves using my number 2 round. This one is great for getting into those small spaces. And when the pigment gets a little too dark, I'll just blot that up with a paper towel until I'm happy with the look that I'm getting. For the acorns, I'm using number 45 pale green. There was already quite enough brown on the card, I thought, and like I said, I wanted this to look more springy, so I decided to make my acorns a little unripe still. And I painted in the ones in the wheelbarrow exactly the same. I used number 93 green gray to do the outer rim of the wheel on the wheelbarrow. And just blended that in, left the inside white. And now I'm going to go back and finish up my squirrel. So I'm using number 64 oatmeal to color in his muzzle and the inside of his ears and his little paws and his belly that's poking out from under his t-shirt. And that I'm going to color in with number 22 carmine red, which is a nice bright color. Just being really careful to stay inside the lines, but those embossed lines that I did at the beginning really help with that. I typically do clear emboss whenever I'm using these markers, just because it does create that little barrier that prevents your color from seeping into each other. And now that my base coat of my squirrel is completely dry, I'm going in with that second coat that I mentioned at the beginning, and I'm using number 60 brown for that. And even though this is called brown, it definitely has more of a reddish tone. And the red squirrels that are native to where we lived in Germany for several years are my favorite squirrels. They're a lot smaller and they have really pointy ears with little tassels on them, and they just have the cutest personalities and they're so comical to watch. So I definitely love shading squirrels to look like the red squirrels that I love so much. I decided that his t-shirt needed a little bit of extra shading, so I went in with number 24 wine red, which is just a hint darker, and just blended that into the carmine red. And I also didn't like that the acorn tops were the same exact color as the wheelbarrow, so I just grabbed my 64 oatmeal and colored right over that with the marker and didn't even blend that out. So now I'm taking a piece of that Hero Arts wood grain vellum and I want to add some color to that. Somebody commented recently that they would like to see how to use colored vellum on a project, and I don't have any colored vellum, so I'm going to make my own. And there are two sides to this wood grain paper. At first I tried to add the pigment to the more textured side, but that wasn't working very well, so I did flip that over. And it definitely worked better on the back side or the less textured side. You did have to keep working at it though to get enough color on there, since it is a vellum surface. It's a little bit coated and smooth. So the good thing is you're not going to get any harsh lines like you sometimes get with distress inks on certain surfaces, but it does take a little work to get the pigment put on the page. So I used tumbled glass for my sky, and I just swept that in from the sides in 3 different spaces, leaving a little bit of white area so that would look like clouds. And I used shabby shutters for my grass, and I'm just being really careful to blend straight onto the page, not from the outside edges as traditionally we use distress inks, because it is quite fragile and it bends easily. So I've die cut that panel with the Lawn Fawn small stitched rectangle stackables. This is the largest one in that set, just to give it that nice stitched edge. And I've added foam tape to the back of all of my images, so I can go ahead and start popping those up and creating my scene on this focal panel. So I've added my tree branch to the far right, and I've left that hanging over the edge just a little bit so that I'll be able to cut off that little white border and have it look a little bit more seamless. And then I've added my squirrel right underneath the tree branch, and then I'm going to add some of these little acorns underneath the leaves like I mentioned, so he can be gathering those up. So I'm just being really careful as I add these not to push the foam tape down all the way until I have it in the position that I want it, since this paper is really fragile and I don't want to accidentally tear it if I need to pull anything back up. So I'm adding one little bird to the top of my tree branch, and I'm adding another leaf up there as well to kind of just fill in that space over there. And then I'll add a couple of leaves down towards the bottom of the scene. I'm also going to add my second little bird down at the bottom on the ground. And I'll add my third little acorn down on the ground as well, just to kind of emphasize the idea that some of them have fallen down and he's gathered them. And then I'll take my last little leaf, and I was trying to figure out where to add that. I thought possibly to the tree as well, but then I thought I would kind of put that up in the air so that it was falling to the ground as well. I've die cut another panel out of some white cardstock using the Lawn Fawn scalloped rectangle stackables, and I'll just trim off the edge of that tree like I mentioned, and then I'm going to take some Tombow Mono multi-glue, and I'm going to add some glue behind all of that foam tape. So wherever the images are, I'll just add a little dot here and there so that I'm able to adhere that vellum without the glue being visible. And sometimes it was a little bit hard to see if there was an image there or not, so I just pressed on it with my fingers to see if it was popped up or not. And then I will just carefully lay this panel right over that white cardstock and gently press that into place, and then I'll just lay a couple of acrylic blocks right over top of that to help it dry flat. For my sentiment, I'm taking a piece of scrap black cardstock, and I've brushed that with my EK Success powder tool, and then I'm going to stamp out my sentiment using Versamark ink. This is a clear sticky ink that works great with embossing powder. And then I'll just coat this with some white embossing powder. This is the Hero Arts Detail White. I just keep it in this large container. Just add a little bit extra there and tap that off. And then I'm going to melt that with my heat tool until it's nice and shiny. And then I die cut that out with the Lawn Fawn Stitched Circle Stackables. I thought that would be a fun different shape. I haven't done a circle sentiment in the longest time. I can't even remember the last time I did one, so I just thought that would be fun. And I'm just popping that up on the front of the panel with some more foam tape. I'm going to work on the inside of the card before I adhere my focal panel, just so everything stays nice and flat. And I'm inking up my sentiment with some Lawn Fawn Mermaid ink. And I thought for something different I would do it right across the bottom of the inside of the card. And it says, "You make my heart jump for joy." And then I'm going to add this other little squirrel that's included in the set, and I'm going to make him jumping right on the word jump. I thought that would just be cute. So I'm inking him up twice as well so he matches. And then I will just pull that out. Super cute. To finish off our card, I'm just going to adhere our panel to the card base using some Tombow Mono multi-glue. And I thought about adding some embellishments like sequins or something else, but it just looked too busy, and sometimes simple is best. I really wanted that really cool wood grain textured vellum to shine, as well as the super cute images and the coloring. So that is going to complete our card for today. I hope you guys really enjoyed. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also leave me a comment below. Here's a couple extra videos you may also be interested in, and you can always click on my photo to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.